Welcome to your Monday. I'm Jay Cleveland Payne, aka your Mr. Monday, and this quick bit of motivation and inspiration was originally published on September the 6th, 2021. The original message goes as follows. There is a saying in baseball where if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. In real life, you should not cheat, but you should constantly test boundaries and norms. So going deeper in this is something that I think is more myth or just myth that we want to believe than it is something people really think about. Yes, people do try to cheat in baseball. Yes, people do not cheat in all sports, but I don't think it really is a sort of commentary for the way the game works. It's that people are always trying to literally cheat to get ahead. You're looking for advantages, looking for ways around stuff, and looking for an easier way to get something. But the notion that every single player is on a team looking to find a way to use pine tar on a baseball or steal signs every time they go up to the plate is a bit of a misnomer. The same way you have people in life who you believe are always looking for number one in a way that includes them always doing what they can to break down everybody else in the process. So let's start with the premise that cheating to get ahead is not necessarily the way we live, although some people do live that way. It's not the most prominent way that a group of people live in any sort of profession, any sort of group. But not that you need to cheat or skirt around any rules, but think of the norms and the boundaries that exist in this moment right now, whenever in time you listen to this, and how different they were, let's say, a year ago. Here we are living in 2021, and we are still living through 18 months or so of dealing with pandemic life, which has changed in that 18 months itself. But the differences between how we manage things right now and how we did a year ago before we had COVID-19 are immense in many cases. Think about the difference we've had in 10 years, in the past decade, and the changes we've had to the norms going on. Think of what we're seeing as we come upon the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks in the United States. Think about that. 20 years from then, we did things a whole lot differently, and there are some things that we still do now that make very little sense because of what we were afraid of back then. Things that were proven not to be something to be so afraid of in the grand scheme of things, yet the norms of the processes did not go away. Let's go back even further. Let's go back to the 60s during the original civil rights movement, if you will, in the United States. The norms of living separate lives, separate but equal, segregated bathrooms, segregated water fountains, segregated life, is essentially being not allowed, being illegal to marry someone who was not of the same color of you. Those norms are definitely not what we're seeing in 2021. But we also do see a little bit, or in some cases, a lot of the same rage and tension that we had back then, only in a different packaging and times. We see some things that are similar, some things that seem like they're exactly the same, and some things that can't be the same because that was literally 60 years ago. So, what you need to do in dealing with boundaries and norms, you're not trying to cheat to get around something, but you're always trying to test them to see exactly how solid they are, exactly how sturdy they are, and exactly how necessary they are. Now, one of my favorite tenets to really believe is never tear down a fence before you figure out why that fence was there. Never put up a fence before you figure out why there's never been one there before. The notion behind that is you may think there's a beautiful sky view behind you if you take this fence down that seems to be up there to keep something in from the backside that's no longer there. But you never know what's going to come in from behind the fence. That fence may be there to keep the wildlife out of your yard, not so much to keep the young ones in the yard that are no longer young anymore. Same being said for a fence being put up where space was not. You may find that that space right there was a natural space for drainage, for example, that you put something in there and you mess something up. And now all of a sudden, when the rains come, they flood your basement because you put something down there as a foundation for that fence that now blocks the natural flow of water into the ditches behind you. That's just a quick sort of off the top of my head example, but you get the point. You need to know why things exist and why they're still there. If they're no longer necessary, and they're in the way, you should try to find ways to eliminate them and improve them as best as possible. If they're extremely necessary, but still confusing as to why they are there, and the situation that makes them necessary maybe what's really unnecessary, work on changing the situation. Work on changing the life around you and those around you that must have this boundary and this norm, and make it so that you don't necessarily have it anymore. And if it's necessary and it's life-saving and it must be there and people just don't quite understand why it must be there, it's not them, it is the actual monument, then you have to educate the people who are new to the area or new to the actual idea of it, or essentially way too young to remember. Going back to the 9/11 analogy, there are people right now who are of age of adults who did not exist, were not here when 9/11 happened, or were way too young to understand it. And there's also people who were young and too young to really process it in an adult way, who are now adults, who are running things and have a different perspective. Those perspectives, those people who weren't born or were too young to even recognize it, and those people who really saw it as an early trauma that they grew into, don't see it in the same perspective as someone who actually was living in it and dealing with it in real time, or someone who was on the outskirts towards the end, an old retired person who had to watch the people that they built up go out and deal with that. The norms and boundaries of just general life change just because people change over time. The norms and boundaries of governments and militaries and things that are organized change because people change over time, technology changes over time, and the need or unneed for things shifts back and forth. We'll see plenty of more fights over that with resources, with people, and yes, still wars and famines and all the things that have been dealt with by humans for the time humans roam the earth. But in the meantime, just be wary that just because a rule exists doesn't mean the rule needs to exist or needs to exist exactly as it is right now. It was put in place for a reason, and you have every right to test to see if that reason is still valid. There's a saying in baseball where if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. In real life, you should not cheat, but you should constantly test boundaries and norms. This original message was published on September the 6th, 2021 from Welcome to Your Monday. For more messages like this one, plus books, merchandise, and other information related to this project, visit the website, welcomeToYourMonday.com.